So this is Jaime. We just met, and he's agreed to talk about that question. What do you think happens after this life? So, what's your first reaction to?
First reaction. There's various reactions. One's spiritual reaction is I think that we're more than just our flesh. I mean, we have a spirit, a soul. There's something more to us than just our physical organs that we have. We definitely enter another time space continuum.
Do you think that's somewhere where you have consciousness, or like you'll be you?
Yeah, I think consciousness continues. It's just our energy. I believe that we're energy. We're internally. We all have a ball of energy, and that transforms. That energy doesn't dissipate; it just transforms into something else. But the consciousness stays with you. So we're basically a cocoon. The energy is inside a cocoon.
So this body's like a shell.
But our real self is not. It has nothing to do with it. Right now, we're just two balls of energy interacting.
Yeah.
Exchanging. Energy, whether it's positive or negative. It's positive right now. But, so I just believe the rest is just materialism. Is I don't think it's the real essence of life or us humans. The human being, what distinguishes us is we have a soul. We have something else about us. We have the ability to reflect on the past, the present, the future. I'm not sure if all the species have that, but I definitely think our energy transforms and it goes into another time space. So whatever I call heaven, I'm not so sure dwelling on concepts of heaven and hell, because they could be existing here as well in this time and space. But I think it's if you're at peace, you enter this space. You enter consciousness. Your consciousness continues and then into another space.
Yeah. Now, do you have a religious upbringing or background?
My religious background is Catholic, but I consider myself a liberal, more on the left, Catholic.
Yeah.
Because I subscribe to liberation theology, which is common in third world countries. Not so common in first world countries, but I subscribe to that type of theology.
I've read a few books about that a few years ago, so I'm a little rusty on it, but it was real big, maybe, I want to say in the 80s, maybe, probably the 80s, like Central America.
Yeah, Central America, Latin America, Asia and Africa.
And can you remind, I guess I'm not real sure, would it teach, it's very, very much into social justice issues, and but I guess I'm not sure, do they have a different concept of what happens after we die, that sort of thing? It's very important to spend your life working towards social justice, trying to bring, I guess you'd say, the kingdom of heaven here on earth, right? Right. Kind of.
Yeah, that's the reason why I mentioned what I did earlier about, I'm not so sure that, the kingdom of heaven or hell is afterward, because some people are living in hell here. Yeah. And or heaven, it depends on your life. There's a lot of moments of happiness here. It just depends on how your relations are with others, how you are, there's many moments you don't have to. But the liberation theology, is about, in St. Paul, it mentions the narrative of Jesus was very much about social justice and with the poor and the downtrodden, and then it was a mission that he was hanging around prostitutes, tax collectors, just humble people, fishermen, and it just shows you that the mission is very much about social justice with among the poor, among the dispossessed, and I think that's where the social justice begins. So liberation theology is about liberating, bringing justice in this time and space to those folks who are in those conditions. So this is why it's so popular in the third world.
And I think it's not just the life of Jesus, but all through the Old Testament, there's an emphasis on God caring for the poor and the widows and the orphans, and
the widows and orphans, and,
to walk humbly and do justice, that sort of thing. This is what God's looking for, that kind of thing. I mean, I've noticed a theme throughout the Bible of God's concern for the poor and the oppressed. So, and Jesus really I'd say personified it, you know, like showed God's concern. Do you what got you started, I guess, in really looking into
liberation? Well, just reading about it. Just I guess it's my own background. You know, growing up in three communities of Chicago that have those characteristics of poverty, street gang violence, and it's something I had to make sense of as a young man. So I had to think seriously about what life and death situations. Because you know, when you grow, when your violence is around you, it forces you to think about, you know, the existential kinds of questions.
Yeah.
You know, why is somebody dead and not me? Why, you know, where do we go at? When you see that as a young person, it's impressionable, and then and it forces you to right away philosophize about that.
Yeah.
And then you integrate your faith with that. So
now, do you believe in the idea of God, a person?
I believe, there's one God.
Because there's always the big question, you know, if God exists, why does He allow all this suffering to go on? And
that's a big philosophical question, and I love reading literature.
Yeah.
So Dostoevsky, I think, puts it best in Brothers Karamazov when one of the brothers, he's an intellectual, Ivan, he confronts his brother Alyosha, who's a monk, and he confronts him with that same question. And I think he phrases it best. It's a real philosophical question. He says, "Why, if God exists, why is this suffering? Why is this God allows this suffering?"
Yeah.
But for people who have faith, suffering has meaning, it has purpose. You know, it's a paradox. Through suffering, we're able to enter higher spiritual consciousness. So this is one of the paradoxes of life.
Yeah.
You don't become, you know, to become spiritual means you're on the go of mountains of suffering, but you learn and it's like gold is tested with fire. So are we. So,
yeah.
So, but you know, philosophically, you know, you can ask, you know, well, is this a loving God? And that could go on. That the pace will continue. But I think that for those who have faith, suffering has a purpose and a meaning.
Yeah.
And you make sense of that meaning.
It takes a lot.
And so that's where you tie it into social justice.
Yeah.
You know,
it does take a lot of trust that, you know, God is there and that He cares. You know. And I think it's possible for someone to suffer and be turned away from God and become bitter and angry.
Yeah, and it's not masochism, kind of acceptance of suffering, but it's just understanding the laws like there's good and there's evil. There's nothing is one-sided.
Yeah.
You know, it's not all happiness. There's a multiple feelings, and there's just you know, the opposite end of the coin. So wherever there's, you know, it's just kind of like some laws of physics. The goodness has to be the opposite.
Yeah. So it's possible to look at something that seems totally wrong, bad, but God is able to make something good out of it, or through faith.
Those who have faith, they can overcome it because of their faith, they will make sense of that. I think that those that lose their faith, or those that, you know, say, well, this is they begin living their hell here.
Yeah. Because
that's when you just can't accept the fact that there could be suffering.
Yeah.
And why is there so much, you know, destruction, violence, you know, poverty? We have the capacity of human beings to address these needs if our values aren't there. So, but this has been, you know, these are some of the things that come out in Scripture.
Yeah.
You know, why is it so difficult for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven? Yeah. Why is it, you know, these questions are asked. Now we could talk about what is the kingdom of heaven. I think it's existing in this life. Yeah. All you have to do is observe children and babies. You can't tell me that. Observe any infants. Yeah. Be around infants or children.
Yeah.
It reminds you of.
Yeah.
You know,
their innocence and.
Yeah, and it's like when a baby smiles at you, you know, that the joy that brings.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Isn't that heaven? You know.
Do you feel
like that remind you of?
Right.
Yeah. You know. So.
Do you feel like different people will have a different existence after this life? Like the way we live this life affects the life to come, or?
Yeah, I used to, but man, now I'm in my 40s, and I just changed the way I think about like judgment, and Judgment Day, and judging others. I just think that ends up causing more damage than good. We either judgment to someone else, but I don't think even God. I think we can't understand God.
Yeah.
The minute we attempt to, we're going to always end up causing more problems, because God's spirit is always was, always moving. So it's an entity that we can't really comprehend.
Yeah.
So
do you?
I don't believe these folks they're going someplace bad. I used to go, but not anymore, because we can't understand God could forgive someone in the last second of their existence, and we have no idea whatever reasons. Yeah. God feels like. So I stopped judging.
Recently, or?
No, just the last 10 years, more and more. Like the more I live.
Yeah. Well, I think the hard thing with judgment, the hard thing with God's judgment is the minute we start saying that God is judgmental, and I actually do think He is judgmental, but the minute we start saying that He is, then we gotta, if we point at other people, we gotta also point back at ourselves.
So just take out the log in your own eyes.
Right.
Yeah. Which is really where it comes. I started looking at myself more clearly.
It's like, man, I sure hope I'm not judged by that same standard.
Yeah. But we're all human. Even when we attempt to do something good, there could be unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's true.
And so we have plenty of examples throughout history. Yeah. There's a lot of good folks whose intentions were good, but they cause a lot of damage.
I think I find when you look at people's motivations, most people have mixed motives in what they do.
Yeah.
Like even the best things that we do, we have some kind of selfish reward, and some of the worst things we do, we might have some excuse where we think that we're doing something good out of it, So then we're kind of forced to say, okay, well, but how does God look at us?
Right.
And do you feel like you have a purpose in life? What would be your purpose?
Well, I feel because of my personal upbringing and faith, I had to. I wasn't, for example, shot. I saw others that 9, 10-year-olds in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So that right away makes you think about purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's the beginning of me.
You survived for a reason.
For a reason.
Yeah.
And I just think we all have a reason and purpose until that day comes. We all have an appointment with that. But, I think that's the big thing that we know humans that we have an end. I'm not so sure other species have that kindness and awareness of the end, which maybe helps them live every day, right, in the present, because it can work.
Yeah.
It can work either way, but you need to live the moment every day. You need to live in the present, not the past or the future. Because the future may not come. If you think you're going to live, you will take this for granted.
Right.
This conversation for granted, but the awareness that it might end.
I've talked with atheists who, do believe, this life is all there is, and once we die, it's just zilch,
Right.
And they'll say that it makes this life much more precious, But on the other hand, if we live forever, and what we do now has eternal ramifications, I think there's another way of looking at it, and that's to say, we're living in a situation now that has that affects eternity, and we'll never be in this kind of situation again. So that makes it more precious to me. It's like we're not in complete heaven and we're not in complete hell. We're kind of like influenced by both good and evil. And if we, as a Christian, I would say, if we go to heaven, we'll never be in a situation where we have a choice between good and evil again. We'll be in God's presence and not facing temptation every day, and not facing difficulties, and not have the ability to suffer ever again.
Right. I think those temptations and all that comes with the fact that we have a material body. We have a body, and when we shift from body, we have a dualism. We have a spirit and we have a body. But when we die, our spirit, our consciousness continues. it's just a pure energy field. So that energy field, that changes. We're in another space. So while we're in this space and in our bodies, we have to deal with the human condition, which is complex. Like you said, the motivations of human actors are complex. Although you have examples of pure evil that we can point to, Hitler. But yet even Hitler could be part of it.
Oh, I'm sure Hitler had his own excuses, like I'm building a nation.
But Hitler's biography is very interesting. He grew up as an Austrian Jew, so he hated himself. So it's kind of interesting, the psychosocial history that he has, hating himself, getting at the roots. But also knowing that Hitler, we would have never known him as a statesman if he was accepted as a graduate student into architecture, into a school of architecture, which was his real passion. See, those are interesting questions. It makes you
and his experiences in World War I.
So historians ask themselves, what would have happened if he was accepted? He would have fulfilled his purpose, which was, he was interested in urban planning and architecture. That was his passion, not to be a statesman. That was by default. But then it makes you wonder, if you believe in God, like that was God's plan, for that to unfold. So it's
hard. Now,
but I believe I have purpose. While I'm alive, as long as I'm alive, I feel like even though I can't comprehend it, internally I feel there is a purpose. I'm in the field of education, so.
Are you a teacher?
Yeah.
Where at? I'm a teacher too.
Yeah, well, I teach at DePaul. I'm a sociologist, but I also teach at 12th grade English at Sidwood Park.
CPS?
Chicago Bulls College Prep. It's a charter school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right over.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's one of the high-performing charters.
Yeah,
probably
I know where that is.
Yeah. So these questions are asked. Like it's interesting. Like for example, we're reading Othello, and Othello, Shakespeare has characters, pictures of characters there. For dramatizing purposes, like you have Iago and Othello, who's pure evil, but his intentions, he's kind of like has this. Motives only go a certain way, but then it's beyond that. It's like he's just a pure evil guy, like causing damage all over. But yet, Iago was injured. He was hurt because he didn't get a promotion by Othello into a rank, into a military rank. So that's one motivation, but it gets deeper than that. Like he's causing damage, and then in the end, he's like, "I am not what I appear to be." Like he accepts his own evilness, his own. So it's kind of a interesting character to look at, there's motivations, but then there's like
one of the things that makes me really believe that like we have a conscience and a sense of right and wrong is, even though like in that it's kind of like a universal thing, it's not just like some people believe one thing and some another, is people universally, if they're doing something wrong, like for example lying, they always feel like they got to make an excuse for it, like I know lying's wrong, but in this case, I think I should be able to do it, or I think I have a pass, and so we know right from wrong, but we think that we're an exemption somehow, or think.
What you have to do is observe children. When children are playing, they're innocent, but yet they know right from wrong. They know when they did something bad. They accept it. You say, "Hey, ask for forgiveness." They'll do it immediately. They'll say, "Oh, sorry."
And that's what
they recognize. I did something that was not.
As a Christian, my understanding of the Bible comes from the idea that there is, like the whole thing with the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve eating this forbidden fruit. They were given the knowledge of good and evil, and so from that point on, the human race has a conscience. We know right from wrong, and so now we have the problem of we know right from wrong, but we still do wrong, knowing it's God's rule. The Bible says God put His law in our hearts, and yet we break it. And so now, how can we get back into a right relationship with God and treat Him like He's actually God, and we're going to obey Him as God? And yet we don't. And so how can that relationship be restored? So, quick question. I want to respect your time. So. If it sounds like you're open-minded enough to understand or accept that it's possible there could be a God who will judge us and hold us accountable at the end. It's possible there could be a judgment day. How do you think you would do? If
I don't know. I wouldn't even like to answer that because I just think that, the human condition is so complex. So even though we think we're good, I just think that we're limited as human beings, and we're gonna make mistakes, and we're gonna hurt even if it's unintentional consequences, or even maybe sometimes intentional. I just think the human condition is very complex. We can't always be good, even when we try. But we can. I think knowing yourself, like that's from the Western tradition, the philosophy of the Greeks. Knowing yourself, knowing your authentic self. Like we have an authentic self that's loving. That's a very loving. That's what God put in our hearts.
Yeah.
If you exercise that every day, I think you're pretty good.
Yeah.
I just break it down to some simplicity. Like Einstein said, you have to make it simple. If you can't, something's not right. Make it simple. If you're loving, you show love, you demonstrate love. That's God. That's God in action. What that means, though, people complicate that. Well, is it? But I think that
different religions have different standards for what that might be.
I try to get away from the judgment, but more like, how can I live every day? How can I demonstrate my faith without professing it? For example, without telling you that I'm a Catholic, how can you know I'm spiritual? That's my challenge every day. I don't have to articulate it. You should be able to know there's something different about this guy. Well, why? Because I'm loving at my relations. I try to be, good with everyone.
Yeah.
And so that begins with a relationship with yourself. And I think a lot of folks, they don't have a good relationship with self. Like they have self-hatred. Like Hitler. I mentioned Hitler is just, he's easy to point to, but that self-hate, the root cause of that hatred, I think that's interesting to get at. A lot of folks walk around with that self-hatred.
Yeah.
Then they project that to others, but loving yourself, you can't love someone else, you just love yourself.
Right.
So just that authentic self, like knowing that we all have, if you observe infants and babies, you see our nature, but yet, kids fight and they argue with the toys, it's mine, and they have to learn it. But you also see like they know good from bad. So but there's a loving, nature to that. I think a lot. If you every day, if your relation, I look at it like I try to retain my relations, and as long as I'm loving and I'm caring and I have compassion, I think I'm in the right. That road will lead to something good. So I try to show compassion the way I expect others to be compassionate towards me when I make a mistake.
So it sounds like you would say, if there was a judgment, God would say that maybe based on like a religious kind of legalistic point of view, maybe it wouldn't be there, but from a personal point of view and a compassionate point of view, you'd be a pretty good person. Would you say that?
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, as far as like reading your Bible or going to church or saying the prayers or doing the rosary or all that.
Well, now that I'm older, I look at that more. That's not the real.
And that's a lot of people say I don't consider myself religious, but I'm spiritual. And I think what they mean by that is they don't want to be a part of that organized religion, or the man-made set of rules or whatever it is. But they believe there's some basic things like love and compassion.
Well, exactly. And those spaces they provide something. Like community is important. Those spaces are there to build a community, and we all like to feel we belong to some community. So it has its purpose. But the reservations, I mean, that can't be the. If we go around prophecy, telling people how to live and all that, I just think we need to keep looking at ourselves.
Yeah.
How are you living every day? Are you loving? Are you compassionate? Are you? And if something's wrong with your relations with people, then you gotta look back at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
And I just think that goes on. It's easy to point to others. Oh, look at those folks.
Yeah.
Look how bad they are. But I think turning the mirror, we need to. That's what I mean about the authentic, like meditating about yourself and. The relationship with yourself is important, because if it's squared away, you have to be squared away. Before I care for others, I have to care for myself first. There's an ethics there. In order for me to be effectively care for others, I have to first care for myself. How do I care for myself? By taking care of myself. How's that? Well, eating healthy, going to the gym, working out, loving myself. If I'm doing these things, I'm gonna be effective in my service towards others. So there's that ethics of. It's dialectical. So.
Does that come out mostly in your work as a teacher?
As a teacher, but that's why it leads to that profession, because providing service. It's one you do with love. Teaching about if you're not teaching out of love, you're not a good teacher.
Yeah.
You have to be passionate about what there's an ethics of care involved.
Yeah.
So
you do feel like you want to spread your beliefs, but more in a non-verbal way, like just more by example.
Way, like my actions should speak louder than always than my words. Yeah.
Now, do you as a sociologist, you've studied major religions and things like that.
Yeah.
So, do you feel like you have a good handle on what Christianity teaches, or
I do, because I read the Bible. So I went to Catholic school. So we read the Bible from for what we refer to as the Old Testament for the Jews. That Judaism, that's the Torah. So you have to be careful when you say Old Testament.
Right. Yeah.
So there's Jewish folks in the room. What are you talking about? Old Testament? That's our Bible.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's the whole Bible.
Yeah, that's the whole Bible for us. So it's all the three great religions, the large religions follow the scriptures. What we refer to as the Old Testament, right? All the prophets, the prophets, everything is followed all the way to Jesus. Then the roads, they go to three roads, right? Jesus the Messiah, Jesus a prophet, and the last prophet was Muhammad, and Jesus is the Messiah for Christians, Prince of Peace, and then for Jews, there's like you can't be the Messiah because we don't have peace.
Yeah.
So we're still waiting for the Messiah. So they go three roads enter, so it's interesting. But all the rest of the prophets are followed. Abraham is the common denominator for the three religions. So Abraham was tested with God, so with his son. But it's like, it's interesting to look at that. And the three largest religions follow them. So they're referred to as people of the book by Muslims.
Right. What do you think about the cross? Like Jesus on the cross. What's your? Like your sociological view and your understanding of the Christian view. What do you?
Well, sociological view is the Romans were very deliberate about their punishment and to formulate social control. Crucifixion was common.
Yeah.
So many people were crucified. That was the way the Romans maintained social control.
Yeah.
And this is how I look at it from a sociological perspective. So now you have the narrative of Jesus Christ. The narrative of Jesus, beginning with Jesus of Nazareth. Was born even his birth. There was conflict involved, right? Because the prophecies. Then a king was going to be born, and that king was going to be a revolutionary. So they tried, the Herod tried to kill all the firstborn son males. So even I just found even as a young man, I found it so powerful. Like that narrative is just, it always got my attention.
Yeah.
As a young directly, reading the scripture is what drew me in, and just the way they would respond. But that whole narrative, so I look at it from a sociological perspective, the Romans were in power. They were. So how do they maintain power? How do they maintain control over a population? That's the concern of the prince, right? Any ruler.
Which makes it seem like Jesus is kind of like out of control. Like he didn't plan it or didn't expect it. It was like he was manipulated and put on the cross by the Romans.
Well, they had to charge him. The Romans were, Pontius Pilate wasn't sure what the real. What has this man done against the Roman law? He didn't really break any Roman law, but the Jewish authorities, they had issues with Jesus.
Right.
He was questioning their basic foundation.
Right.
So they're like, hey, this guy's a heretic. Hey, who's this guy?
Yeah.
And the Romans were like, hey, is he going to cause a rebellion? If he's going to cause a rebellion, he's going to be an issue for us. But as long as he's, contained, we don't care. Yeah, y'all all you want. You want to hang around with the fishermen and prostitutes, go ahead. Just don't challenge our power, our authority.
Right.
But the Jews are, hey, he's causing a lot of havoc, and he's making these statements that I will tear down the temple and build it in 3 days. And what is this heretic? Who is this heretic saying he's the son of God?
Right.
So the Jews have more issues with the Romans. I'm not so sure how I interpret Pontius Pilate washing his hands. I'm not so sure that's enough. I think that we're all at fault. We put Jesus to death.
Right.
Like, it was the Jews. They, it's their fault. The Romans.
Yeah.
I think, and then folks they've crucified him. So.
I couldn't say.
Yeah, the Romans are not pardoned. The Jews not pardoned. None of us are.
Yeah.
I think in that moment we might have said, I might have been in the crowd saying, crucify him.
Right. Given what they didn't know at the time.
He's just a heretic, right? Oh, there was a book that was mentioned in the coffee shop. Not that I would, let me see. I think it's called Jesus. Let's see, I wrote it down. I was advised to read it, but it's to this point of, different perspectives, but Jesus, what's it called? Here it is, Zealot. The life and times of Jesus of Nazareth. So, in this book, Reza Aslan talks about how he was just a zealot. He was just a zealot. He was just, causing trouble, and didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to look at. Not that right, I like to read everything. I'm open-minded, but I like to look at the historical life of Jesus as much as possible. But the narrative is still powerful to me because the way he answered the authorities is still. I still wonder, like, what author could think of those answers? That's a pretty good author, I mean, we have good authors like Shakespeare. He's a genius.
Yeah.
He had 25,000. His vocabulary was 25,000 words. Most of ours is 5,000 to 8,000. So I mean, you got to recognize genius. He could, dialogue and the plays, the drama. You can think of these answers, but to me, it seemed like more powerful. Like when they said, "Are you the Son of God?" He's like, so you say like the way he answered was caught my attention. I was like, how does this, how can someone answer that way? Like, how can someone, if I'm a writer, if I'm an author, think of such ingenious answers?
Right.
And I think that's just too good. That's just too good the way. But then they get questioned. Hey, the Bible was written so many years after the events happened. The historians come in and they're like, we have to look at these so-called facts and contextualize them. If I tell you a story and 100 years go by, is that the same story that's being told? The Bible was written, many years after these events took place, but yet we still have this authentic narrative that's powerful.
Yeah, there's.
So then that's
it's very consistent between all the different books of the Bible. There's a consistency there.
Yeah, so then that's my personal faith comes in. I'm a sociologist, but I like to look at it from like. Who's ruling? Who's in power now? For example, the U.S. We live in the empire. We're in the belly of the beast. We're the Roman Empire.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So who are the zealots of our time? Who are we labeling as zealots?
Yeah.
And this is how Jesus was in his time. There was no Christians. It was just Jesus. And at the time, disciples going around. He was talking in parables. Following. He was also a healer. And so. I think he would have been against organized religion as well.
Now, do you think Jesus was who he said he was, the Son of God?
For me, based on my faith, I say yes. That's my faith.
So,
if I didn't say that, I wouldn't be a Catholic.
Yeah.
So, I consider myself, like I said, but I subscribe to liberation theology, so I'm not in the liberal camp or the conservative camp.
Right.
I'm more on the left. I'm more on the left, leaning politically.
Would the liberation theology camp say that he's the Son of God?
Oh yeah, they say the Son of God. They just believe that social justice in this world is for the downtrodden, the poor. Yeah, and that's where the missions need to be in this life, in this time. Not you'll get your reward in heaven, but what can we do here to alleviate this pain and suffering for the poor? Yeah, that's where That's right. So as a sociologist, that's right.
So Jesus is the Son of God, which I believe he is too.
Even on the birth, those who don't have faith don't believe that the conception of Jesus Christ was as the narrative says. An angel appeared, Gabriel, to the mother of Jesus, Mary, saying you will be, you will have, you're going to be pregnant, and not because of Joseph. So if you don't subscribe, if you don't believe in that, right there, that's where.
Kind of the dividing line.
Yeah, that's it. Then you just think Joseph impregnated Mary. Therefore, there's no
divine
divine nature of Jesus Christ, other than he's just a human being who was spiritual, who was had a spiritual side. He was a healer or maybe a zealot, like this author argues. He was just a zealot, born of Mary and Jesus, and that he misunderstood, and then they put him away. Yeah. Well, that's where the faith comes in. Do you believe that? This narrative, do you believe in angels? Do you believe, that he was born? His birth is significantly different than most human beings. Because if not, then he's just a human. So then he's just a prophet, just like all the Muslims will argue.
Right.
And the Jews, well, he's just a prophet, and he prophesied the word, and he's misunderstood. He's just a zealot by non-believers.
Are you aware of why Orthodox, I don't want to say like not Eastern Orthodox, but traditional Christianity, or the Orthodox understanding of Christianity says that Jesus must be the Son of God? Like why it's so important? Let's talk.
I just think it's interesting because you have Protestantism. You have Martin Luther. When he went against the Catholic authorities, and he did the thesis, and he said, "Well, we don't need these intermediaries. We don't need popes.
Yeah.
We don't need bishops. We don't need cardinals." And so that was powerful. And when that happened, it challenged the authority of the church. The church had more power than the king.
Yeah.
If the pope, excommunicated the king, that was it. The king was done.
Oh yeah.
So that tells you the enormous power of the Catholic Church, and then the Inquisition. But you have this conflict with Islam, right? Always, with the Ottoman Empire, and that goes back to the 16th century. So now we have jump forward now, we have this conflict. It's an old conflict, between religion.
Yeah.
And you have Protestantism, you have Catholic, you also have Islam. Still fight for bickering and fighting over the truth.
Yeah.
And that's not going to end anytime soon.
Right. No.
Now we'll separate that from the small minority of terrorists who use religion for their political agendas. I don't conflate that. That's just I don't conflate that with the religion.
People are doing it in Christianity too.
Even the Muslims themselves are ashamed of those folks.
Jesus said that many will come in my name, doing what I claiming to be teaching my teachings, and they'll be doing things that I don't teach at all, so I do find it interesting that in Christianity, what separates us from our founder and Muslims from their founder is that the closer we get to Christ, the more authentic we become, more peaceful we become, the more ready we're willing to die for someone else. But in Islam, the closer you get to Muhammad, the more you're willing to kill for your faith, or at least.
Well, that's for some Muslims, right? Because you have different.
Some, I shouldn't say just general.
Yeah, because if we bring 100 Muslims in the room, they're not going to agree on that same interpretation. They're going to say, "Well, I don't think it's about mine." They'll tell you a real Muslim's about peace, and they really mean it.
but a real radical Christian is someone who's willing to give his life up for others.
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I had a discussion in class over what is the meaning of.
I'm sure you're getting lots of good.
Love. The discussions are great. And, I have a lot to draw from, but it's love. What is the ultimate sacrifice of love? And I gave my example. For me, it's that. It's giving your life.
Yeah.
So I said, for my children, I'll take a bullet in the head. I gave that example in class. And they're like, whoa. They're like, how do I show I love them? I'll take a bullet first before them. This is how I demonstrate that I love them.
We just had a sermon in church yesterday and talked about the verse where Jesus said, if anyone wants to be my disciple, he must be willing to give up or to carry his cross daily, which basically means you must be willing to give your life up, but on a daily basis. And we can't die every day, but we can die to ourselves every day. We can find lots of little ways to put other people first, and to serve others. So
I still think that's the ultimate demonstration of love, is to give up your life for someone. For some it's too dramatic, but I just think there's something to it. Because it's no longer by yourself. It's no longer by yourself. And all the great spiritual leaders we have, Dr. Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, they're all saying the same thing.
They're willing to put
it. And then they come to this realization, like at the end, Dr. King's speech is powerful. I've been on the mountaintop. I've seen the glory.
Right before his
that's powerful. That's what he was basically. I don't care if you kill me. I've seen the glory. I've been on the mountaintop. That's deep. That's like. And that's where faith is tied to social justice, to a rights movement. That's where the Jesuit tradition is an interesting tradition within Catholicism and the third world liberation theology for me, because it brings faith into practice and makes it concrete. And that's why I subscribe to. It's not the afterworld. Oh, let's do this for when you die, you'll reach heaven. No, I try and make heaven now in this time space.
Yeah.
It's possible. It depends on how you live.
I know. I've talked to some people who tend to see heaven. Like you're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good.
Yeah, you know the good, right?
And that's kind of looking at heaven like it's like almost like a selfish thing. Like, oh, you're just trying to get to heaven. You're just doing this so you can go to heaven. So the way I look at it, though, is heaven is to actually be with God in a right relationship.
That's right,
with
in a
God.
right relationship.
And to me, that's not a selfish thing. That's like, who wouldn't want to be with their Creator for eternity?
Eternity.
And so if eternity is at stake, yes, I do want to go to heaven, and I don't think that makes it a bad thing,
No, it's not. I just think it becomes problematic when you stop thinking about you're no longer, you think this is hell. And when I hear people talk that talk, they're pessimists. I have an issue. I take issue with that because you're giving up on what your transformation here.
Yeah.
And that's where I draw the line. Like, that goes against what I've been describing. Like, social justice, is about this time and space, not just the afterlife.
Yeah.
And then you have a choice to make to create change now. First with yourself, to transform others begins with transformation of self first. This is when we go back to more like the Gandhi quote, transformation. You must live. Live the way you wish others.
Yeah.
The way you want others to live, you must first live yourself.
Yeah.
That's what transformation. That's powerful. Most, if we had more of that, this would be a different world.
Right. Well, I want to respect your time, and probably went way longer than you had. So.
That's okay. I don't mind.
Let me ask
I'm an educator,
last
so
question.
I don't mind.
For the people,
at time different. It's more flexible.
for people at my church.
Yeah.
How do you feel as, like, other than the cameras, how do you feel about, like, church people like myself going out and talking to strangers in this way? Like,
I'm all for it. Socrates went around, asking the, Athenians, what they thought they knew, and then, he came out with, well, the only thing I know is I know nothing. Not meaning that he knows nothing, but meaning that he knows to accept the limitations. That he can't know everything. Nobody knows everything. So by going around talking to people, I think it's very democratic.
Yeah.
And these public spaces this is a public space, I'm using this electricity. Nazis didn't come to tell me, hey, get out, you're not paying the bill.
Yeah.
So people will be creative. They'll find these spaces. I just think as long as you're not, enforcing a particular doctrine, you're good. In my book. Yeah. The problem is when you go around, walk around with a truth with a capital T and start beating people over the head,
right? And
then making them feel guilty or trying to. I just think you're causing more damage than good. But you did a great job of just being educated from an educated perspective. I think you'll gain more credence.
Yeah.
Because you didn't do that. You didn't cross that line, and as long as that you make people are going to be comfortable. That you're going to get more authentic data.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, I do like to ask good questions and find out where people are coming from. If I was just to be say a street preacher, for my faith, I would be preaching at people, telling them things that I don't know if they have that question in their mind, or I don't know if they're at that place. A lot of people don't even believe in God.
Exactly. A lot of people don't believe in God, so you turn them off right away. But if you just say, I have some questions.
Yeah,
you get more people willing
to find out where people are at.
Yeah, I think that's a better approach. It's gonna always be better than if you're coming, because the minute people say, "Oh, you have an agenda," they're gonna react to that. They're gonna resist.